Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming along to video arts section here of the open program. I'll talk a little bit more about who video arts are and what we're going to try and cover over the next 25 minutes, half an hour or so in a moment. My name's Martin Addison and I'm CEO of Video Arts. We've got a small agenda which, as the title suggests, is focused on this subject of millennials, though that will really encompass millennials, stroke Gen Y, and focus on really some of the elements of what we might think they are from a workplace perspective, some of the truths behind the stereotypes, and then why video and the growth of video is so important, bearing this group in mind as well. And then we'll share some potential tips for you, whether you're designing learning or looking for learning, on how to talk their language and what to actually look for, and on also how to get them engaged. I would say, as an avowed, excuse me, got microphone here, as an avowed Gen Xer rather than somebody who's a Gen Y or a millennial, a lot of what I'm going to talk about in terms of engaging people through video and learning is equally applicable. So I think it's interesting, and no doubt you can't really look in the press or online without hearing about millennials or Gen Y, because we are reaching a tipping point. The millennials themselves, if you like, in terms of a definition, we're talking about a demographic group that probably researchers and commentators would look at the birth years from the 80s up to 2000. And that's really the group that I'm counting into Gen Y and millennials here. And they are beginning to reach that tipping point. The really interesting element is that this is a group who are digital natives, who've grown up with technology and grown up in a digital world, as opposed to me, who started as video arts as a definite digital immigrant when we were selling VHS tapes, I think I can still remember back to. So that's the big change that's happening with that tipping point. It makes a big difference to all of us as learning designers and curators of learning, though, because this is the group who are now either entering the workplace as those millennials around the year 2000, or in terms of Gen Y, this is the group who are now moving into management roles. So they are now moving into roles where they're coming onto your management development program, leadership development, and suddenly it's important to engage with them in that aspect too. Before we look at that in great detail, a little check on who we are at Video Arts. We definitely, I think, fall into Generation X as an organisation. We're about 44 years old this year. And really, in terms of what we do, we're very much focused on the delivery of the best quality and most engaging content, with an eye to that being video-based. We'll be forever linked to John Cleese as one of our founders, but as you'll see if you take a look afterwards at our booth, our focus is very much on continuing that legacy, to focus on the highest quality script writers, the best subject matter experts, and the most famous emerging talent that we can find to appear. Things really have changed, so we still talk about video, but it's very much in a different world of video online to video in the classroom as to where we started. And that's really, again, moved on apace in the last few years as video has moved to be an integral part of the best quality e-learning. Many of you may have sat in on the last session and seen something brand new in terms of new gamified video arts e-learning courses with our partners NetX. And so those are all parts of our armory that many of you perhaps will know well. What's equally important for us too is that we don't just create off-the-shelf content. We work with many of you now to create bespoke and custom e-learning and animation that fits your needs alongside that off-the-shelf solution. And we're also, in the last 2 or 3 years, very much in the space where we recognise that video is not something that we have to create for you. Very often, and we'll go back to this with the Millennials audience, you can create fantastic video internally, particularly in terms of onboarding, induction, of getting individuals to engage with each other using video. Where we step in is to make the video that you create with some basic production tips and workshop format something that may be 60, 70, 80% better with some very simple help and tuition. So those are the sort of elements in our mix, and I'll touch on some of those as we move through. In fact, we're going to have a little taste before we do that to tie this up of what's the latest in one of Video Art's award-winning programs from the library around performance review. This was the gold winner at the Cannes World Corporate Media Festival. So let's take a look at that for a couple of minutes.
The performance review lies at the center of the manager's relationship with a colleague. But the wrong approach, the wrong attitude can catapult a talented person straight to the competition.
Is everything running smoothly?
Well, the thing is,
It's the same drill as last year. Execute program, repeat, repeat.
Come on, Tracy, I'm not insulting you.
I'm slapdash. I've always been slapdash. How dare you?
You can't plan with Alan. He's a force of nature.
So you're going to need to make these changes, or you're going to regret it.
When things start to go wrong, they call in an expert. Me.
What have you done to Maxine? Maxine!
Maxine is in the process of forgetting the tragic performance review you just gave. Okay, we're gonna try this again, only this time I'm gonna talk you through it.
Who are you?
Let's review what just happened before you try again. If you don't know where your performance review is heading, then of course you're gonna get lost.
Isn't that what performance reviews are all about?
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
That really worked.
Of course it worked. That's because you stuck to the rules.
People are complicated, but the rules are simple. Don't lose good people because of bad habits.
So there's a quick taste of what we're talking about in terms of engaging and using video to tell a story and reach learners in general. We're going to focus a little bit more now around that millennial audience, though, and there's some fairly unfair misconceptions, I think, that perhaps we have when millennials enter the workplace. This I like, which is the cover of Time magazine from a couple of years back, which talks about the me generation. It does actually say how they're going to save us all as well, so we need to bear that in mind too. But some of those conceptions perhaps are that attention spans are much shorter. People are watching television the whole time. Given the economic situation that we've been in, and that we're hopefully still continuing to come out of, there's a perception at times that, oh, you should be grateful to have a job, and I've heard that from finance directors in the past, believe it or not. And then there's this well-known conversation piece that mobile phone has suddenly become grafted onto people's hands almost inevitably. I'm going to debunk some of those and build on them as well, if I may do. First, let's pick up on that mobile one and attention spans. I like this picture. This is from a photographer, an artist called Eric Pickersgill. So you can look him up afterwards, or Google removed. And what he did was actually to look at how the sort of joining of people and their devices over the last year has become a force of nature in some ways. Can you believe, incidentally, the first iPhone was released in 2007. Doesn't it feel like it's been here forever? 2007. So this is how rapidly this has become something that we all just do. And what Eric Pickersgill did, and he's taken a whole series of pictures, is to look at this almost addiction that we all kind of have by removing the mobile devices from the images of groups or from couples or from families. So take a look and you can just see how we are so, in some ways, disconnected from each other and so wrapped up in the thing that's in our hand. That's maybe one element, which is an accusation I think you could level at many of us, whatever our ages. There's also this point around attention spans and the fact that there is this element where, perhaps potentially for millennials especially, we are in this world of instant access to a wealth of information, and that leads to this state of constant partial attention. If you stand up and talk these days, or even if you're in a meeting, you almost need to prepare yourself for the fact that somebody's going to be looking at their phone at some point. And that's just the way that life is, whether you're in a meeting, you're at dinner, whatever. So I guess in some ways, attention spans, we haven't lost the ability to hold our attention. But I think in this different scenario, we're all in a world of constant partial attention. We're going to have a look at a little clip as well from one of our Essentials programs to perhaps help make the point that it isn't just an issue for the younger generation on actually keeping someone's attention and listening.
So we're on the motorway for 9 hours in the baking heat, and by the time we got there, it had completely melted.
Good, good. I'm so glad. So, why did you want to see me?
Well, sometimes I feel like my ideas and suggestions aren't really being listened to.
Which is why you come to see me, to get that sorted, to talk it through. Shoot.
Well, the problem
is that people are more interested in what they're saying than what you're saying. Typical.
Yes, people are. Sometimes it's impossible for me to even reach...
Too fond of the sound of their own voice. That's the problem, isn't it? Imagine how wonderful the world would be if people really listened.
Well, I'm glad you feel like that, because I have something
Take
important.
the boss, for instance. He wants the logo redesigned for next week. I mean, does he sound us out? No.
Getting back to the topic at hand, I sometimes feel like you're waiting for me to finish speaking so that you can say whatever it is that you want to say, and it's not a very communicative relationship.
Maybe a golden swoosh to jazz it up.
I don't quite see how that's going to help us.
Is gold in right now? It's the boss. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I'm looking at that now. Yeah.
What's strange is that he's completely capable of getting it right with the boss. Look, he's taking notes, asking questions.
Yeah, and is that the bruise blue or the blonde blue you wanted?
He seems sat forward and smiling.
I know, it's a hard choice, but I think we're on the right track. I'll look into that.
He's empathising. I don't believe it.
So I'll get those designs worked up and you can choose your favourite on Wednesday?
Clarifying what's been discussed and the next steps. Perfect listening when it comes to the boss.
Yeah, OK. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. No, you hang up. No, you Oh, he did. Sorry about that. You were saying?
Our office is about to be sucked into a black hole.
Great. Let me know how that goes.
And your hair's on fire. I'm pregnant and it's yours.
Wonderful. Good to hear.
Listening is something you do actively. Take notes and ask open questions. Use positive body language and empathise. At the end, summarise and outline the next steps.
So, the importance of active listening and paying attention. How about another mythbuster in some ways? There's the stereotype about continually watching TV. Certainly for that millennial audience who are now about to come into the workplace, you probably saw coverage in the news last week. I'll talk about that later as well, through BBC channels, that as of last week, officially now, the audience in the younger generation spend more time online than they do on watching TV. Video arts are actually part of a TV group. In fact, one of our sister companies produces My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, among other things, as well as stuff like Paralympics. But their whole business has shifted from just looking at a single channel to a multi-channel environment with YouTube channels affiliated. So that's a big change, and it's actually our millennial audience as learning designers who are moving there as soon as they come into the workplace. There's then the aspect that I go back to about being grateful for a job. And there are two elements of this. I guess this first was from a CIPD Employee Outlook survey, that this group are twice as likely to be dissatisfied with their job. To some extent, there are the expectations in terms of what the workplace or the modern workplace actually is, as opposed to what we would like it to be. But I think there's also an element that highlights how our millennials and Gen Y who are in the workplace see the sort of traditional hierarchies of many businesses. So think about the kind of command and control and management structure in most big organizations still. And that's something that baby boomers or Gen X like myself probably went into and accepted. There's definitely more of a resistance to that way that a business is structured, and more of an open question of, is this how hierarchies need to be structured in modern organizations? So that's probably picking up on that element too. And we, all of us, I think, in terms of learning, naturally place a lot of importance on developing people potentially into management as part of that, churning people to go up that hierarchy, whereas many people coming into the workplace now potentially are not looking for that kind of career. They're looking to move around in a career and experience different things, and our job in learning is to find a way to support that rather than just this bottom to top drive around a management structure. I think that's highlighted in the second point as well, and also from the point of view that the group that we're talking about again have bought into that concept around a more balanced work-life balance, if we call it, to use that phrase, but also having more of a sense of purpose around what they're doing rather than just financial success. Again, for those of you who've got kids who are kind of coming into work, we found this blog which was really good. So make a note of that particular address, and that was the question was posed, and this, I think, the little cartoon is maybe a little bit unfair around the aspirations again, but that's a really good blog to take a look at. So let's come on to how the video question bears into this, and video for learning particularly. Why it's so effective is that millennials, as I said earlier, have grown up as digital natives. We're all using our cameras now, which again is a reinforcement of the fact that it's actually something they're used to doing. Going back to my point on workshops, it isn't a case of expecting somebody else will have produced something. We're all more and more used to doing it for ourselves and blending that, maybe with subject matter expertise or other content that exists. But it's very much a collaborative exercise, and video is a real integral part of that. It's also that video is something that they can access from that thing I talked about, which is stuck in everyone's hand. So a video is not something that you can just watch in a classroom and then come back to in a few months' time. It's there. It's a just-in-time device. It's probably how you communicate with your friends. It's how you send messages. It's how you really, in terms of capturing information or wanting to find out about things, you look on a video. Certainly school kids now, the idea of going to a library and looking through Encyclopedia Britannica, which I can vaguely remember doing for homework, it's now YouTube, and that's how we'll find out. The other reasons, I think, which I've touched on a little bit with some of the clips like performance review, for example, are that video and film are a great way to tell a story. So it can be a story you capture internally within an organisation of your peers. It can be something they connect with and engage with because of the characters or the situation they're in as managers or as somebody new in the workforce. But video is a great way to capture that in terms of a story. And that's where it has that emotional connect. And it's very hard to do that with text or with just a simple exercise in terms of a test. A video can really get to the point in terms of tuning into people's emotions. And again, we'll touch on how and which emotions in a moment or two. I talked about that shift between TV to online. Again, the YouTube statistics keep going up and up and up, it feels, but you can see the group that are coming into our learning audience or are there and coming in as managers, video is their go-to option. And then back to that research that I talked about from last week, that's the tipping point. We've now gone to a time, and that will continue, where television and the concept of watching a big screen will become less and less important, and more of this will be done online. And just to reiterate that finally, 25% of us watch television as it's broadcast from this group. And of kids who are now coming into leaving school, 75% are using catch-up, on-demand, YouTube, Netflix. So they are setting the agenda for when they want to watch. And when they come into the workplace, they'll want to set the agenda for when they learn. I was surprised this was so low, actually, as a final statistic from that recent research, that 50% of young people watch video online every day. So it's not even an argument. Video needs to be at the center of learning for this audience. I guess the question as we finish up, though, is to think more about what you need to do as L&D people. This is all very interesting in the sort of wider context, but what is it that we can learn, I guess, more specifically from these elements? The first is you need to get to the point. Remember that attention span, and I think that goes for a wider audience as well. People are in a world where they expect information quicker before they go off and do something else, like go onto WhatsApp, whatever it may be. So you need to get to the point with your learning and e-learning quicker than you did before. You need to make sure that content works brilliantly and looks great on a tablet or a mobile device. I know, sort of looking around the hall today, there are still some people who obviously have a big struggle in terms of the move away from Flash and some of the issues that are incumbent with that. Elements like video work fantastically on these kind of devices. You need to talk their language as well. And that's why, again, in terms of story and getting people to buy in and visualize with characters who they identify, that can very often be a very powerful way to do that, rather than dropping in that subject matter written expert's script as a piece of text with a voiceover, or actually getting a talking head to do that. They can buy into that concept by talking people's language. And then finally, don't be scared to entertain. So entertainment and engagement go hand in hand. And the idea that people buy in or have an emotional trigger is very often because they see a humor in a situation or they laugh. Again, you just need to look at what the highest ranking channels are and what the most visited YouTube clips are to know that the word funny or how to is right up there. And so how can you bring that how to and funny into your learning? That's the challenge to have. No sneezing pandas though, I'm afraid.
Hi there, I'm Good Manager.
And I'm Bad Manager.
Delivery will be 3 weeks late. It'll drain our profits, we'll lose our largest European customer, and the whole company will go down the plug hole.
Can't chat,
I've got to dish out some discipline today.
Ouch. Our office is going colour.
We are not going colour. Not in a million years.
The first step is to cut the clutter.
Cut the clutter, exactly. Behold my new wearable office organiser solution.
Bing, you've got mail. Bing, you've got mail. Bing, you've got mail. Bing, you've got...
How do you make him stop?
Bing.
Well, the
problem is that people are more interested in what they're saying than what you're saying. Typical.
Yes, people are.
Nobody is bloody listening to me.
Have a little cry if you want.
So that's more of a bite-sized essential view on how you can utilise video, but let's tie up now with a couple of final thoughts. The first is really about how can you keep people engaged, and I've talked about how doing that in terms of the use of video. I'm going to share some feedback from one of our partners internationally, a South African learning company called Calio, who we at Video Arts work with. This is some useful content to bear in mind in terms of how you can measure that and keep that engagement. The first is evidence of consumption. So how many people have watched it? Again, think of YouTube, think of that sort of gamification element that we heard in the session beforehand. People like to have that information. Evidence of moderation. So again, how do other people rate the content? We're in a social learning environment now. Think of that 70-20-10 and the 20%. And think of our roles maybe as curators, but actually people are looking for moderation from the wider audience than just us telling them it's good. Instant curiosity. So does the title, does the description, does the thumbnail that you're using, or the cover page that you're using give instant curiosity? Does it make somebody want to go in? We're back again thinking of your own behaviours on websites or visiting. 1, 2, 3 clicks. If you're not there, you're probably disengaged. So think of how you design or the content that you deliver fits into that. And then finally, they are looking critically for that time benefit judgment. So how long is it going to take me to consume this? How long will it be? Will it be worth it? Is there a badge for me at the end of this, for example? Again, I've talked to people when we were doing some research group with Cass Business School with some students who wouldn't even look at a video clip if it was 6 minutes long, because that was a lifetime to them. So that's just an example of thinking of how you gauge it for your audience. I think it all ties in as well to this idea of creating that workplace and creating a culture that this new audience buys into. And again, getting away from the old, perhaps, way that businesses and learning ran of knowledge equals power to one that's much more of a sharing culture where the curation is your role, but it's much more of a group element involved. So that was a very brief run through. Again, we'd be happy to pick up just on next door on the stand on content solutions from Video Arts and other things, but I'll leave you with what I think sums it up perfectly when you're thinking about learning and video in learning, and thinking about engagement and how entertainment and education always go hand in hand. Thank you very much.